She sat in the back row. No uniform, no medals, just a quiet guest. But when the principal reached the final page of her introduction, and the room heard combat pilot, rescue missions, Bronze Star, the applause hit like a wave. Because she wasn't just someone's mom. She was someone's hero. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about heroes hidden in plain sight and the moment when ordinary becomes extraordinary, consider subscribing for more content that explores how the greatest courage often walks among us unrecognized until truth is revealed. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Roosevelt Elementary School's multipurpose room in Cedar Grove, Missouri, where folding chairs had been arranged in neat rows for the annual Veterans Day assembly that had become a cherished tradition connecting students with military service members from their community. At 9:30 a.m. on November 11th, 2023, the atmosphere buzzed with the controlled excitement of 400 students grades K through 6 who were eager to hear from the guest speakers whose military service would provide education about sacrifice, patriotism, and the price of freedom. Captain Angela Martinez sat quietly in the back row among other parent volunteers, her simple blue sweater and khaki pants indistinguishable from the casual attire worn by dozens of mothers and fathers who had taken time from work to attend their children's school event. At 38, she appeared to be just another suburban parent whose primary concerns involved soccer practice schedules, homework supervision, and the endless logistics of raising 3 children in a middle-class community where military service was respected but distant from daily experience. Her position at the back of the room reflected her preference for remaining unobtrusive during school events, attending when her children needed parental support, but avoiding attention or recognition that might draw unwanted questions about her background or previous employment that she preferred to keep separate from her current identity as a full-time mother and part-time real estate agent. Around her, the multipurpose room filled with students, teachers, and community members who had gathered to honor veterans on the federal holiday dedicated to recognizing military service and sacrifice. The program included presentations by local veterans, musical performances by the school choir, and student essays about the meaning of military service that reflected the patriotic education emphasized in Missouri's public school curriculum. Students, please welcome our Veterans Day Assembly speakers, announced Mrs. Patricia Chun, the school principal whose enthusiasm for honoring military service had made Roosevelt Elementary's Veterans Day program one of the most comprehensive in the district, featuring guest speakers from various service branches and conflict eras who shared their experiences with students eager to learn about military life. The featured speakers included Master Sergeant David Rodriguez, recently retired from the Army after deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Williams, a National Guard officer who had served in disaster relief operations, and Captain James Thompson, a Navy veteran whose submarine service had taken him to every ocean during the Cold War era when nuclear deterrence required constant vigilance. Each speaker represented different aspects of military service that would provide students with comprehensive understanding of military careers, training, and the personal sacrifices that military families made to serve national security interests and protect American values and freedoms that students might take for granted in their daily lives. Angela listened to the presentations with professional interest, recognizing technical details and military cultural references that civilian audiences might miss, but appreciating the speaker's efforts to translate military experience into terms that elementary students could understand and relate to their own lives and community experiences. Her own military background included 12 years as a combat search and rescue pilot, flying HH-60 Black Hawk helicopters on missions that required penetrating enemy territory to extract wounded soldiers, downed aircrew members, and special operations personnel whose survival depended on immediate evacuation under conditions that challenged every aspect of pilot skill and crew coordination. The combat rescue missions had taken her to Iraq, Afghanistan, and numerous classified locations where American military personnel required emergency extraction from situations that exceeded normal evacuation capabilities and required specialized aircraft, training, and crew members willing to risk their lives for mission accomplishment and fellow service member welfare. What the school community didn't know was that Angela's military service had earned recognition that included the Bronze Star Medal for heroism during combat rescue operations, the Air Medal with multiple oak leaf clusters for aerial achievement under combat conditions, and the Purple Heart for wounds received during a rescue mission that had saved 8 soldiers from a downed helicopter in hostile territory. Her transition to civilian life had been deliberate and complete, seeking anonymity that would allow her to focus on raising her children without constant reminders of combat experience that included traumatic events and life-threatening situations that were difficult to explain to people whose military knowledge came primarily from movies and television programs. Now I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Principal Chun announced, consulting her notes while students shifted in their seats with the restless energy of children who had been sitting through presentations for nearly an hour. We have a very special guest today who represents the kind of service and sacrifice that makes our freedom possible. Angelo assumed that another veteran had been added to the program at the last minute, probably someone whose schedule had finally allowed participation in the school assembly that honored military service and provided educational opportunities for students to learn about military careers and the personal qualities required for military service. This speaker didn't come here today expecting to address our students. Principal Chun continued, her voice carrying unusual emotion that suggested the introduction would be more significant than the routine presentations that had characterized the morning program. In fact, she came here simply as a parent supporting her children's education, just like many of you in our audience today. The principal's words created a ripple of attention throughout the multipurpose room as students, teachers, and parents began wondering which community member would be called forward to speak about military service that hadn't been previously announced or included in the program materials that had been distributed before the assembly. Angela felt a growing sense of unease as she realized that Principal Chin's introduction might be directed toward her, though she couldn't understand how her military background had been discovered when she had been careful to maintain privacy about service that she preferred to keep separate from her children's school activities and community involvement. 6 months ago, our school nurse mentioned to me that one of our parents had an interesting background that included military service, Principal Chun explained, her voice carrying across the silent multipurpose room where students and adults were listening with complete attention to an introduction that was clearly building towards something extraordinary. I decided to do some research, and what I discovered was so remarkable that I felt our students needed to hear about service and sacrifice that represents the very best of American military tradition and heroism under the most challenging conditions imaginable. Angela's heart began racing as she understood that her carefully maintained privacy was about to be shattered in front of her children's entire school community, including teachers, administrators, and parents who had known her only as a quiet real estate agent whose primary concerns involved her children's academic performance and extracurricular activities. The school nurse, Mrs. Jennifer Kim, had apparently noticed Angela's reaction during a first aid presentation when military medical procedures had been discussed, leading to casual conversation that had revealed Angela's combat medic training and helicopter pilot background without Angela realizing that the information would be shared with school administration. This parent served 12 years in the United States Air Force as a combat search and rescue pilot. Principal Chun continued, reading from documentation that could only have come from official military sources that required security clearance and administrative approval to access. She flew HH-60 Blackhawk helicopters on missions that penetrated enemy territory to rescue wounded soldiers, downed aircrew members, and special operations personnel whose survival depended on immediate evacuation under combat conditions that tested every aspect of pilot skill and crew courage. The multipurpose room had become absolutely silent as students and adults processed the significance of Principal Chin's words, understanding that someone in their community had participated in the kind of military operations that they had only seen in movies or television programs about military heroism and combat operations. Angela remained frozen in her seat, hoping that the introduction would remain general without identifying her specifically, though she understood that Principal Chin's detailed knowledge of her service record meant that her anonymity was about to end regardless of her preferences for privacy about military experience. During her military career, this pilot completed over 200 combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, participating in rescue operations that saved the lives of American and Allied military personnel who would have died without immediate medical evacuation from hostile territory where enemy fire made normal rescue operations impossible. Principal Chen's voice carried increasing emotion as she read from documentation that detailed Angela's combat record with precision that could only have come from official military personnel files that required significant administrative effort to obtain and review. Her service included participation in Operation Red Wings, where she piloted one of the helicopters that attempted to rescue Navy SEALs who had been surrounded by Taliban forces in Afghanistan's mountainous terrain. When the first rescue helicopter was shot down, she volunteered for the follow-up mission that successfully extracted survivors despite heavy enemy fire and challenging weather conditions. The reference to Operation Red Wings created an audible gasp throughout the multipurpose room as community members recognized the military operation that had been featured in books and movies about Navy SEAL operations and the helicopter crews who had risked their lives attempting to rescue special operations personnel surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces. Angela closed her eyes as she realized that Principal Chun had obtained access to classified mission reports and personnel records that detailed her participation in one of the most dangerous and well-documented rescue operations of the Afghanistan conflict, ensuring that her military background would become public knowledge throughout the school community. On June 28, 2005, this pilot flew into a combat zone where Taliban forces had already shot down one rescue helicopter, killing all crew members and passengers who had been attempting to rescue 4 Navy SEALs who were surrounded and fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds in terrain that made rescue operations extremely dangerous. The detailed account of Angela's participation in the Operation Red Wings rescue attempts was creating emotional responses throughout the multipurpose room as students and adults understood that they were learning about actual combat operations that had involved life and death decisions and personal courage under conditions that challenged human endurance and survival. Despite knowing that enemy forces were specifically targeting rescue helicopters, this pilot volunteered for the second rescue attempt, flying through heavy ground fire to reach the crash site, where she and her crew successfully extracted the lone survivor of the original rescue team, while under continuous enemy attack. Principal Chun paused in her reading, allowing the significance of Angela's combat service to register with an audience that was beginning to understand that someone they had considered an ordinary community member had participated in extraordinary military operations that had saved lives under conditions that tested every aspect of human courage. For her actions during Operation Red Wings and subsequent rescue missions, this pilot was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for heroism, the Air Medal with oak leaf clusters for aerial achievement under combat conditions, and the Purple Heart for wounds received during combat rescue operations. The recitation of Angela's military decorations created a wave of recognition throughout the multipurpose room as community members understood that the quiet parent they had known as a soccer mom and real estate agent had earned some of the military's highest awards for combat heroism and exceptional service under life-threatening conditions. Angela felt tears beginning to form as she realized that her children were learning about her military service for the first time along with their classmates, teachers, and friends' parents who had never suspected that their community included someone whose combat record included participation in some of the most dangerous and significant military operations of recent conflicts. This remarkable woman completed her military service as a captain, having served with distinction in combat rescue operations that saved hundreds of lives, while risking her own safety repeatedly for the welfare of fellow service members who depended on her skill, courage, and dedication to the rescue mission that defines combat search and rescue operations. Principal Chun looked up from her documentation and scanned the multipurpose room until her eyes settled on Angela, who had become the focus of attention from students and adults who were trying to identify which parent had been the subject of the extraordinary military service description they had just heard. Captain Angela Martinez, would you please come forward and share your experience with our students who need to understand what real military service and sacrifice look like? The request created an explosion of whispered conversations and turning heads as students and adults searched for Angela among the parent volunteers, their expressions combining surprise with growing recognition as they identified the quiet real estate agent whose military background had been completely unknown to the school community. Angela's children, 8-year-old Sophia, 10-year-old Miguel, and 12-year-old Isabella, turned to stare at their mother with expressions of shock and amazement as they processed the information that their mom, who helped with homework and drove them to soccer practice, had been a combat pilot who had saved lives under enemy fire in Iraq and Afghanistan. The walk from the back row to the front of the multipurpose room felt like the longest movement of Angela's life as hundreds of pairs of eyes followed her progress, their expressions reflecting awe, respect, and curiosity about someone whose carefully maintained anonymity had been shattered by revelations about military service that exceeded anything the school community had expected. "Students," Principal Chun said as Angela reached the front of the room, "I want you to look at Captain Martinez and understand that heroes don't always look like what you see in movies. Sometimes heroes are the parents who help with your homework, coach your sports teams, and volunteer at school events while carrying the memories of service and sacrifice that protected our freedom." The principal's words created a respectful silence throughout the multipurpose room as students processed the lesson about heroism that existed in their own community, demonstrated by someone whose military service had been hidden beneath the ordinary activities of suburban motherhood and civic participation. Angela accepted the microphone with hands that trembled slightly, understanding that she would need to find words that could bridge the gap between combat experience that had defined her military identity and the civilian life she had built around raising her children in a community where military service was respected but not personally experienced. "Thank you, Principal Chun," Angela began, her voice carrying across the silent multipurpose room where students and adults waited to hear from someone whose combat record had exceeded their understanding of military service and personal courage under life-threatening conditions. "I never expected to talk about my military service today because I came here as Isabella, Miguel, and Sophia's mom, not as someone who used to be a helicopter pilot. But I think it's important for you to understand that military service is something that ordinary people do when their country needs them to serve." Her words began to relax the tension in the room as students and adults recognized that Angela remained the same person they had known, despite revelations about military background that had challenged their assumptions about community members and the diversity of experience that existed among parents and neighbors. "Military service taught me that the most important thing we can do is take care of each other, whether that means rescuing soldiers who are wounded in combat or helping your classmates with their homework when they're having trouble understanding something new." Angela's approach to discussing military service emphasized values and lessons that students could understand and apply to their own lives, avoiding graphic details about combat operations while conveying the significance of service and sacrifice that had characterized her military career. The medals and awards that Principal Chin mentioned are important because they represent recognition for doing your job under difficult conditions. But the real reward for military service is knowing that you help protect people who couldn't protect themselves. She paused to look at her own children, whose expressions reflected pride mixed with amazement as they learned about their mother's military background and understood why she had always emphasized the importance of helping others and taking responsibility for community welfare. "I want you to know that heroes are all around you in your families, your neighborhood, and your school community. Some heroes wear uniforms, some wear business suits, some wear teachers' clothes, and some wear the everyday clothes of parents who are raising children and contributing to their communities." The message resonated throughout the multipurpose room as students began understanding that heroism wasn't limited to military service, but could be found in various forms of community service and personal sacrifice that made their daily lives possible and secure. Angela's 15-minute presentation to the students focused on military values of teamwork, dedication, and service to others while avoiding detailed discussion of combat operations that might be inappropriate for elementary students or traumatic memories that she preferred to keep private. Her approach to discussing military service demonstrated the same systematic thinking and concern for others that had characterized her combat rescue missions, adapting her message to audience needs while conveying important lessons about service, sacrifice, and community responsibility. The presentation concluded with enthusiastic applause from students, teachers, and parents who had gained new appreciation for someone they had known as a community volunteer but now understood as a combat veteran whose military service had exemplified the highest standards of courage and dedication to duty. "Captain Martinez," said 8-year-old Tommy Chun during the question period, Were you scared when you had to fly into places where people were shooting at your helicopter? Angela's response reflected her understanding of how to discuss combat experience with children while conveying important lessons about courage and duty. Yes, Tommy, I was scared sometimes. But being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what needs to be done even when you are scared, especially when other people are depending on you. Similar questions from students revealed their curiosity about military service and their growing understanding that heroism involved ordinary people doing extraordinary things when circumstances required courage and sacrifice for the welfare of others. The assembly concluded with the entire school standing to applaud Angela's service and her willingness to share her experience with students who would remember the lesson that heroes could be found in their own community, serving quietly while contributing to the safety and welfare of others. After the assembly, Angela was approached by numerous parents, teachers, and students who expressed appreciation for her military service and amazement at discovering that someone with such extraordinary background had been participating in their community activities without recognition or acknowledgement. "Angela, I had no idea about your military background," said Mrs. Thompson, whose son played soccer with Miguel. "Thank you for your service, and thank you for being such a wonderful example for our children about what real heroism looks like." Similar conversations continued throughout the day as word of Angela's military service spread through the school community, creating new respect and appreciation for someone whose contributions to community life had been valued, but whose military background had remained unknown. Isabella, Miguel, and Sophia approached their mother after the assembly with expressions that combined pride with curiosity about military service that had shaped their mother's life before they were born, but continued to influence her approach to parenting and community involvement. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell us about being a pilot and rescuing people?" Isabella asked, her 12-year-old perspective allowing her to understand the significance of military service while questioning why such important information had been kept private. Angela's response reflected her desire to protect her children from traumatic aspects of military service while helping them understand the values and experiences that had shaped her approach to life and parenting. "Sweetie, military service was very important to me, but being your mom is the most important job I've ever had. I wanted you to know me as your mom first, and I thought we'd talk about military service when you were older and could better understand what military life involves." The conversation continued at home that evening as Angela shared appropriate details about military service while answering her children's questions about helicopter operations, military training, and the experiences that had led her to choose service and the eventual decision to leave military life for full-time motherhood. 2 weeks after the Veterans Day assembly, Angela received a letter from the school district superintendent inviting her to participate in curriculum development for military appreciation programs that would be implemented throughout the district's elementary schools. "Captain Martinez, your presentation at Roosevelt Elementary demonstrated the kind of authentic military perspective that our students need to understand the reality of military service and sacrifice," wrote Superintendent Patricia Davis. "We would be honored to have your expertise in developing educational programs that connect students with military service in meaningful and age-appropriate ways." The invitation reflected recognition that Angela's combination of military experience and educational perspective provided valuable capabilities for curriculum development that could enhance students' understanding of military service while respecting the complexity of military experience and the diversity of service members' backgrounds. Angela accepted the curriculum development invitation while establishing boundaries that would allow her to contribute expertise without compromising her privacy or exposing her children to unwanted attention about their mother's military background and combat experience. Her approach to curriculum development emphasized military values and lessons that students could apply to their own lives, while avoiding graphic details about combat operations that might be inappropriate for elementary education or traumatic for students whose family members were deployed in current military operations. 6 months after the Veterans Day assembly, Angela was invited to speak at the Missouri State Veterans Affairs Annual Conference, where her perspective on veteran transition and community integration would contribute to state programs supporting veteran families and community recognition of military service. Her presentation to State Veterans Affairs officials emphasized the importance of community integration that honored military service while enabling veterans to build civilian identities that incorporated military experience with new roles and responsibilities in family and community life. Veterans bring valuable experience and perspectives to civilian communities, Angela told the conference audience. Effective veteran support should facilitate successful application of military skills and values to civilian opportunities while addressing service-related challenges that might affect transition without overwhelming veterans with constant attention to military identity. The conference presentation resulted in Angela's appointment to the Missouri Veterans Affairs Community Integration Advisory Board, where her expertise in veteran transition and community involvement would influence state policies and programs supporting veteran families throughout Missouri. Her board service reflected recognition that her successful transition from combat pilot to community volunteer demonstrated effective integration of military experience with civilian life while maintaining military values and contributing to community welfare through diverse forms of service. Today, Angela continues her real estate career while serving on veteran advisory boards and participating in school district programs that educate students about military service and civic responsibility. Her approach to community service reflects military values while building civilian relationships and contributing to educational programs that benefit students and families. Her children have become advocates for military families and veteran recognition programs at their schools, using their mother's example to educate classmates about military service and the importance of supporting community members who have served in various capacities. The Veterans Day assembly that revealed Angela's military background continues to influence Roosevelt Elementary's military appreciation programs, with annual events that honor community veterans while educating students about the diversity of military service and the ways that veterans contribute to civilian communities. Principal Chun reflects on the assembly as a defining moment in the school's approach to military education and community recognition. Captain Martinez taught our entire school community that heroes walk among us every day, contributing to our lives while carrying the memories and experiences of extraordinary service that protected our freedom. The recognition extends beyond individual appreciation to systematic changes in how the school district identifies and honors veterans in their communities, with programs that respect veteran preferences for privacy while providing opportunities for appropriate recognition and educational contribution. Angela's influence on military education extends through curriculum development programs, where educators learn systematic approaches to military appreciation that honor service, while addressing the complexity of military experience and veteran transition challenges that affect family and community integration. The quiet real estate agent who had hidden her combat pilot identity proved that military heroism creates lasting values and capabilities that enhance civilian communities through diverse forms of service, demonstrating that veterans continue serving their communities through roles that maintain military values while building new identities and relationships. Her story demonstrates that military service creates enduring obligations and opportunities for continued service that transcend uniform requirements, enabling veterans to contribute to community welfare through various roles that honor military experience, while addressing contemporary challenges and building bridges between military and civilian communities. The school assembly that transformed her from anonymous parent to recognized hero established principles of community recognition and veteran integration that continue to influence educational programs throughout Missouri, ensuring students learn about military service through authentic experiences that connect military values with civilian applications and community contribution. Angela's legacy demonstrates that the most meaningful recognition often comes not from formal ceremonies, but from community understanding and appreciation that enables veterans to contribute their experience and values to civilian life, while building relationships and serving others through diverse forms of community involvement and civic participation.